I am Miss Lucy Saunders and I'm an art teacher. This video is guidance for A-level art and design and can be used as guidance for both projects, Unit 1, Personal Investigation, and Unit 2, Personal Investigation, and Unit 3, Externally Set Assignment. So to just give you a quick recap over the whole of the A-level, which you're probably quite familiar with now, but it's always good to just remind ourselves. You would have completed AS Unit 1, so the PCE, Personal Creative Inquiry, which is an exploratory project or portfolio with outcomes based on subjects and themes which are personal and meaningful. And now you will be working on either Unit 2 or Unit 3. So you have Unit 2, which is the personal investigation, and Unit 3, which is the externally set assignment. So as I said, this video can be guidance for either of those two during your A-level. So typically year 13 of your studies. Unit 2 is 36% and Unit 3 is 24% of your overall qualification alongside the AS Unit 1, which is 40%. Please keep in mind throughout this video, this is one suggestion of guidance, so one way that you could approach these two units. That does not mean that that is the definitive way to go about it. The sort of nature of the art A-level is that it is not prescriptive. The idea is that you can be creative and approach it however you want. I will be suggesting some ways of structuring or addressing the assessment objectives, which you should use as guidance alongside the guidance of your teacher and alongside your own ideas of how to approach it, having looked at the exam specification, the exam board specification. Okay, so this is the second video of 4. I mentioned in the previous video that the last video was for the extended written element, which is just for the PI, so there isn't an extended written element for the ESA. The other 3, including this one, can be used for any of the units and don't need to be watched in order necessarily. You might decide to start with photography and presentation and then look at artists. It doesn't really matter. You can dip in and out of them as you see fit. It might be a nice idea to watch all the way through and then see where you need to go to improve or gaps that you think you might have, but there's no right or wrong way. So as I said, this is video 2. So we will be looking at artists, observational responses and combining the two. And the outcomes will be how to look at artists, how to demonstrate observational skills, and then how to combine the two to further your development. All of these things will be allowing you to address the assessment objectives. So AO1, critical understanding, AO2, creative making, AO3, reflective recording, and AO4, personal presentation. The 4 do not stand alone. You can't really separate them into different areas, although thinking critically about artists, of course, would be critical understanding. You'll also be responding in a creative way, and you'll also be recording that and presenting it. So all 4 of the assessment objectives are always feeding into each other. So try to keep that in mind as you're working, and try to think about how they feed into each other rather than thinking of them as separate assessment objectives. Okay, so by now, if you are following the videos in order or working sort of through the project in a more linear sort of way, you will have made these decisions. If you haven't, pause here and have a little look through making these decisions. So thinking about your theme or idea, you need to choose several artists, think about what medium you'd like to focus on and what you might like to take photographs of. Perhaps you've made some of those decisions and not others. As your project develops, you will probably make more of those decisions, or the things that you want to do will become clearer. But it's good to have a document like this one on the screen in order to have it as like a working document. You know, you might come back and cross something out, write something out, make a note to yourself. This doesn't need to be finished and, you know, resolved. whenever you're working on each of the units for A-level, you have a sustained period of time. So one piece of work doesn't get handed in and marked. The whole body of work is marked at the end. So that means you can at any point go back and see what else you want to sort of change or develop, but be sure to document those changes in decision, because that is part of what your teacher and your examiner wants to see. That journey of your decision making in the development of your ideas is exactly what we're looking for. Okay, so thinking about these questions that I have referred to in other videos, but just to sort of focus mainly on, to begin with, the artists. So you've got your theme, you know what your project is going to be about, you've done some research, and that has fed into some sources. You might have visited somewhere in order to put your work into context. So all of this creates phase one, your initial research phase. They feed back into each other as you develop your contextual understanding and look at some more research. Your theme might shift slightly, and you'll spend some time in a cycle between those areas. Once you have made those decisions and done some research, you'll then need to look at artists. And that does also help you. It is also research, it is also theme building. As I said, the creative process and the assessment objectives and the way they're designed to reflect the creative process do continually feed into each other. They are a cycle. So we are going to be looking at, to begin with, who can you learn from? So part of putting your work into context is looking at the wider world. Art does not exist in isolation. So artists will have been influenced, professional artists, by their own research, and it is really important that you are influenced by other artists and can demonstrate that. And this isn't just a GCSE or A-level way of working. Even in the development of art throughout time, really famous, incredible artists studied under masters and copied what they did before they then developed their own style. So it is a very typical way of working, to look at other artists, perhaps even copy sections of what they've done in order to learn from them. So sometimes there are conversations around whether copying artists is meaningful. And I know lots of art teachers and lots of artists have different ideas about copying. If you want to copy a section of an artist's piece of work, as long as your reason is a good one, then it can be really meaningful, in my opinion. So if you think, wow, I love the texture that they create on the skin in the painting, in their portrait painting, for example, copying a section of that portrait will help you figure out how to apply your paint in a way that looks like the artist did it, in the same way that they did. And then you can take that technique forwards and edit it slightly and make it your own. But sometimes the only way to figure out how to create a technique is to have a go at it yourself. So if you want to do an artist copy, think carefully about what it is that what the purpose of that copy is. If you already know how to do the things that artist is doing, and you can do it very, very well, spending several weeks of your art A-level time making that copy is not necessarily furthering your understanding or furthering your demonstration of that. So think carefully about those choices, speak to a teacher, and make sure that what you're doing has meaning and relates to the assessment objectives. So a way to respond to artists is you can create a page or a board or a short film, whatever medium you'd like to create your work in. And this is sort of a very rough guide of what might go onto that page or board. So as I mentioned, a copy of the artist's work or a section of it, there's a point past which, if you're not learning anything new, you might just be using your time in a not that helpful way. So a section, if that's going to get you going to further your understanding of that artist, a section is great. Maybe do two sections of two different pieces of their work if they're going to show you slightly different things. You are now an A-level artist, you've been studying art for several years, and whether something is meaningful, or if you are not really learning anything from it, then that's going to be reflected to your teacher and to your examiner too. So the next thing is an analysis, so some written analysis on your artwork, but don't repeat your essay. So if you've already done your 1,000 word extended written element as a separate essay, don't write the same thing into your sketchbook as well. Again, you'd be wasting your time. If you haven't just analysed that artist in your essay, obviously go for it in this section. If you are working on your extended written element within your sketchbook, for example, this is the place to put that extended piece of writing about this artist. Okay, so it depends on whether you've chosen to do an essay or work in your book with the written element. I hope that's clear. The next thing is to show some relevant images of the artist's work, and the word relevant is really important. So yes, a little bit of context is important. So, you know, whether that person was creating work in the 14th century or is currently alive and creating work now is going to be relevant to your understanding of that work. So a quick sentence or two about where they're from, when they were working, anything about their life that's interesting, absolutely. But a descriptive, you know, several paragraphs about their biography of where they went to art school and things like that are not what we're looking for. We're looking for analysis and art-specific vocabulary. So telling me that they had went to a school in Italy, for example, if they were therefore influenced by the Italian masters and the Renaissance painters, and it has really art-specific relevance, great, add that in. If not, sort of skip to the good bit, you know, skip to the bit that makes sense and really, really highlights your understanding of the artwork itself. So that was relevant information. Sorry, I think I skipped a bit there. Relevant images of the artist's work, I think was what I was. Both are important. So that was about the information. The images, if you're looking at portraiture and your artist has a body of portraiture work, but also a body of landscape work, it would not be meaningful to fill your pages with landscape images. An image to say, oh, they also create landscapes, great. But you need to be demonstrating why this artist is relevant to your project and what you're going to learn from them. So I think I put those 2 points together a little bit by accident. Relevant information, so relevant writing about the artist's work, quite specifically, not just about their life, and relevant images that are meaningful to what you are learning from them. Okay, as well as that, your own opinion, how it relates to your project, what it is about that artist and artwork that you are going to be taking forward, and an artist response, which we'll come back to. So roughly, those are the kinds of things that you might expect to see on an artist page. Mainly what you are needing to do and how you approach this, as I said, is not prescriptive. You can decide to do it slightly differently, but you need to show what you have learned from this artist and how this will impact your own artwork. So a suggestion of how to do it, but as long as you're answering those questions, then you are addressing the assessment objectives. Okay. So you are now completing effectively the subject-specific research. This is your creative process from 1 to 4 and then filtering into your final outcome. And the context and the photography and all of those things are what we're focusing on here while we're looking at what we're looking at in this video. So some examples of that little list I showed you. These are 3 separate examples, I think by the same student that I used to teach. And you've got the artist's name, some images of the artist's work, and then this person has done a copy. So on each of these pages, there is an exact artist copy in order to practice pencil skills and this like real level of hyper-realistic portraiture, which is what the student was looking at. So the next few slides are going to be a few examples. If at any point you think, oh, that's an interesting one, pause it and have a closer look. Again, this student, was looking at the artist and created not an exact copy, but using a similar medium and in a similar style to sort of practice the idea of how they would do it, a little bit of analysis and a few images of the artist's work. Same here, a couple of sections of copies of the artist's work and also a few sort of testers of colour or little like swatches of paint, and the title reflects the style of painting as well. So everything about that page shows me, even at a glance, as an art teacher marking work, I think, yeah, this person gets it. Visually, I haven't read not even reading the writing that's there. Visually, I can see the colours reflect the artist's work, the title sort of reflects it, there's some excellent painting and drawing, and then I would of course read the analysis as well and see how this person is using specific vocabulary and how they're talking about how they're going to take this forward. A slightly more simple example, there would need to be some writing as well, but I think it's on the next page. But you've got images of Henri Matisse on the one side and the student's response on the other. So shows visual understanding. They've used a very similar style and created an image that reflects the artist's work. Another example there. Okay, so as we've talked about, you've followed through this little flow of collecting all your research. You've now looked at artists, so you would need to create 3 or 4 or more. There isn't a number that the exam board specifies, but I would recommend 3 or 4, depending on the depth. If you're going into real detail with each artist, then 3 is great. If you are going slightly less deep, you might want to do even more, depending on your project. So after you've looked at your artists, the next step is you're going to need to create observational work and photography. So what primary sources will you look at to explore your ideas? So you've looked elsewhere for the theme and the research and the context and the artists, and now what will you look at and look at primary sources? So to define that, information or objects or experiences that you have engaged with firsthand. So it is not photographs off the internet that somebody else has taken. Obviously, the internet is an excellent tool for education, but just be quite careful with finding things on the internet. It is really important that you address things in real life, whatever that may be, and try not to get too limited by what you sort of think is accessible to you. No matter where you live and what your circumstances are and what the transport in your area is like and what the local facilities are like, there will be definitely something you can engage with as a primary source. Even photographs of your own hands, things you might take photographs of your friends, you might take photographs in your art classroom. There will be something. It could be a visit to a museum, a gallery, a pet shop, a botanical garden, a nature reserve. It could be a still life that you set up in your kitchen, a photo shoot of your sister, a time lapse that you film out of your bedroom window of the sun setting, something that you sit in front of and draw. You can document this in many different ways. I've referred to photography and drawing as your observational responses, but there is a requirement that you must draw at some point during this project. Some of the marks are allocated, that needs to be addressed, but you can respond observationally to things in many, many different ways as long as you are doing it. So once you have your own photographs and you have looked at an artist, you are now going to need to respond to the artist using your own images in a way that shows how your project is moving forward. So, for example, this is a project that is on the WJC website, and it is a personal investigation project, so Unit 2. And this student has looked at Alexander McQueen, a fashion designer or a fashion design company, and they have referenced the artist and their artist study, and then as a response created some similar or inspired by outfits on a mannequin, then photographed them and then drawed them. So this is an excellent example of engaging with an contextual reference, so Alexander McQueen, and then engaging with a primary resource using different fabrics and textures and things on a mannequin, and then demonstrating those things and creating a response of their own. So photography and drawing, and then sort of they've continued it and designed their own work. So that's the next sort of stage, developing. But here, this is just a really lovely example of looking at something that exists in the wider world. So a fashion designer, then engaging with something, whether that's materials, something that already exists. They've used materials and a mannequin, photographed it, drawn it, designed from it. So they're combining the things they've learned with their own ideas. Again, pause this and have a closer look if you think this is inspiring or think that you would like to spend longer on it. This is the same student further on in their project. So on the one page, they've looked at a historical garment, so a crinoline cage. Again, so this time it isn't a person or a fashion line or an artist as such, it is a historical garment. So that still counts as a contextual reference. It's brilliant. So they've engaged with something that already existed in the world, a contextual garment, photographed it, responded to it, and then in the next page, recreated something similar. So I think it says, I bought this, they've gone and bought this garment to try and recreate a similar style to the historical piece they were looking at, and then photographed it, you know, deliberately fanned out the skirt to try and get a certain shape. And as the project continues, they go on to make designs inspired by that. So looked at something that already existed, engaged with something themselves, and documented it. So this project that we looked at a moment ago of the artist page, they've then taken their own photographs, these images that are close up of a person's face, and painted them in the style of the artist. So engaged with something that already exists in the world, and then engaged with something that's personal and primary, and sort of mixed the two. So you can totally see the influence of the artist in the brushstrokes and in the colour mixing and in the style of painting, but now it is from their own photographs, from a primary source that they have sat in front of and drawn and also documented by taking a photograph. So again, go back and pause anywhere that you think you would like to have a closer look and really engage with what that might mean for your project. Because although I've given you lots of examples, this is going to be completely specific to whatever you are looking at. But the general formula would be to create artist study pages or boards of at least 3 or 4 artists relevant to your ideas. But again, that is not a number given by the exam board. That is a very rough guide. It's kind of completely depend on how much depth you're going into. Take photographs and draw or paint objects or views that are relevant to your ideas. And there should be a stage where this doesn't show artist references. So there should be a stage where you do just sit and draw or photograph the thing as it is, without being responding to your artist. Okay, so just showing that you've observed it and engaged with it as it is. And then the third step is to combine the both of them. For example, drawing from your photograph in the style of one or more of your artists. So just to nip back again and have another look at that page again, a great example of looking at an artist who works in a certain style or technique, creating copies and sort of getting a hang of the technique and how you might work like that, then engaging with a first-hand source, a primary source, and then combining the two by painting from those first-hand source images in the style of the artist. And we will talk about it in a later video, but you will then go on to further this and further this. So don't worry too much about the idea that your work might look too similar to the artist. If it does at this stage, that's fine. This is development day one. And as you develop your project, it will completely become, you know, much more your own artwork. I'm not suggesting that you spend your project copying other artists. This is the very beginning phase where you are demonstrating that you have been influenced by other people, and then you will pull in some more influences, and then take it on to be, you know, much more your own. So please don't worry about that side of it if you are. So just to leave that on the screen for a moment longer. Artist studies, then observational work, and then combining the two. Okay. Thank you for listening. I hope that's been helpful. And remember, there are 4 videos in total, and some of the AS videos might be useful as well, because they are also all just about how to put a project together. And the actual, although A level is obviously more advanced than AS, the structure or approach to addressing the assessment objectives can be seen as similar. The marking criteria, it uses similar language. So do feel free to dip in and out of the 4AS videos as well if you think that they will be helpful. Thank you very much.